Hi, everyone. Welcome to Microsoft CA exploits. We're going to take you from simple misconfigurations all the way up through domain admin takeovers today. This is a really fun talk for us to give, mainly because we get to show you guys a little bit of secret sauce that our pen test team likes to use. And it's one of the ways that they go from zero to admin very, very quickly inside of networks. So who are these people talking to you right now? Well, my name is Matt Durrin. I am the Director of Training and Research for a company called LMG Security. We are a cybersecurity firm based out of good old Missoula, Montana. And Tom, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
And my name is Tom Pohl. I'm the penetration testing team manager and principal consultant at LMG Security as well. So I get the pleasure of jumping into all my coworkers' engagements and finding all the vulnerabilities.
Oh, there you go.
And, exploiting them the best we can, so we are helping our customers be better and do better.
Wreaking havoc in the best possible way. For those of you looking at the roadmap today, here's basically what we're going to go through. So we didn't want to just start off by dropping into a network mysteriously and just going after a certificate server right away. We wanted to show you a couple of ways that we would actually break in from the outside. How do we get that initial foothold? How do we establish ourselves inside of the network? And then how do we, from there, elevate, go after ADCS services, and really kind of complete the takeover from that point? So we'll talk about how attackers get in. We'll talk about why we would target the CA in the first place. We're going to go over a series of commonly observed misconfigurations, things that we run into very, very frequently. And as we go through, we're going to talk about how to mitigate those problems. So for those of you that are running in more of an admin capacity, or for those of you that are looking at running from a more defensive side of things, we will be showing you how to fix these problems. It's not all doom and gloom, and we're not just here to scare you. And then we'll end up with our top controls for the year 2024 and the ones that we've highlighted in this presentation. So for those of you who haven't done this yet, downstairs in the expo hall, we have a booth, and we have a big treasure chest set up on the front of that booth. In every one of your grab bags, you should have received a key. We invite you guys to go down and take an attempt at opening that treasure chest with that key. If you open the treasure chest, you win a drone. And we've had 3 that we brought with us. We've given away 2 so far. So a lot of people have tried it. If you haven't done it yet, your chances of having the right one are actually pretty high. So we'd recommend going and taking a look at that. So really quick, let's talk about how attackers actually break into networks. And we're going to model some of our attack pathing today off of these kinds of stats. So this comes from a Unit 42 report, and this is the top attack vectors for the 2023 year. 2021 and 2022 as well. And you can see the big ones that attackers are really going after, and this has skyrocketed over the last few years, are going to be software and API vulnerabilities, and then previously compromised credentials. Now, when I say previously compromised, I will fully include weak credentials in there as well, and this is something that we'll showcase as we move through. So let's talk about our plan in general. What are we going to showcase for you right now? Our plan is going to exploit some kind of vulnerable asset in a network to gain our initial entry. We're going to establish a foothold. We are going to compromise a user account or multiple user accounts. We're going to go after Active Directory Certificate Services, or ADCS, as you'll hear us refer to it. We're going to get ourselves boosted up to admin, and then we're basically just going to own the entire network at this point. So let's talk a little bit about what the certificate authority actually is in a network. And we're just going to level set here for a minute. For those of you who know this, bear with me, we'll get through this. But this is a digital certificate issuer. It's responsible for handling your public key management interfaces inside of your network. It does things like encrypted connections, secure email, it handles web access, and a lot more. So, Tom, do you want to give us a little rundown on why the CA is such an important part here?
So, in order to exploit this in your environment, typically what we do is we focus on authentication. So, part of the PKI infrastructure, it can actually be utilized in combination with Kerberos for doing authentication, and that's what we really care about when we're in your organization hacking your network, because typically we're finding vulnerabilities where we can basically go from low or no authenticated access directly to privileged access and even full domain compromise.
Exactly. So that's why we want to go after the CA. This can really give us the keys to the kingdom when we get into a network. We oftentimes find that custom created certificate templates, things that are pretty common when we look at bigger networks, are oftentimes misconfigured. And this is a jackpot for us because there are some really simple mistakes people make in those custom configs that allow us to take advantage of them. We can also elevate up to a privileged user if we can find one of those problems. And the spoiler here is that this happens very, very frequently. Like I was saying before, this is one of the things that our pen test team really likes to go after, and they have a lot of success with. Now, we want to talk about this too. When you go after certificates inside of a network, there can be long-lasting consequences. This isn't something that can usually be fixed by something as simple as a password reset. And this is why offensive security professionals go for this, but it's also why hackers go for this. This gives them persistent access. Anyone know what the default retention time for a cert is?
Yeah. 2 years. So it's either 1 or 2 years, depending on the cert.
And this means we can also go after things like credentialed access without having to touch LSAS, which is really nice from a detection standpoint, because it means that we can bypass things like EDR software by just not setting off those bells and whistles inside the network. Now, the other thing we want to talk about here just briefly are golden ticket attacks. And that means that we're going to go after the certificate authority's private key and forge our own certificates. And these can last for a really long time. This is one of our sneakier tactics for lurking. And fortunately, I've got Tom here on stage because he was actually quoted in one of our other presentations. So Tom, I'll let you quote yourself here.
Yeah. So, this is what's important is that, when if you're able to issue a certificate, if the organization doesn't realize that, hey, there's a certificate out there that shouldn't exist, it can be utilized. So if you cause a password change, say, oh, we need to reset everyone's passwords. If you don't revoke those certificates, that I can immediately, you change your password, I can get your NTLM hash immediately just by re-authenticating using that certificate, because that certificate's good for the validity period that it's been issued for. And if I'm a bad guy and I can do things like modify your certificate template, I can say, you know what, that's going to last for 30 years or however long I want.
Yeah, it's amazing how well that trick actually works. So what kind of access are we actually going to need here? Let's go over how we're going to go about this. So we're going to start with basically nothing. Just standard access into a network. We're going to find a weakness, we're going to land and expand, and then we are going to showcase a few variations of this start to finish kind of attack. How do we go from having no access all the way up to just owning everything? And the case study here we're going to use is obviously not going to be a real company. We're going to use a fake one. So we're going to go after a company called SuperZero Incorporated. These are heroes for hire. They have a commitment to excellence, and they are committed to helping you achieve your goals. Sounds like someone you trust with your sensitive data, right? We bring this up because they are going to suffer from a fairly common and widespread vulnerability. And this is something we want people to watch out for. When we're talking about software vulnerabilities, we have seen an absolute exponential increase in the number of zero-day vulnerabilities and just software vulnerabilities that have been released, utilized, and abused over the last few years. And we anticipate this is going to continue on. Hackers are gaining access to things like source code. That mixed with evil artificial intelligence engines like WormGPT mean that they can quickly analyze that source code, find something that is incredibly vulnerable, and exploit it within minutes. We have an example of that in one of our webinars on YouTube. But SuperZero has an internet-facing Apache Spark server. And this is something that we see used in a pretty good number of commercial enterprises. But Spark has had a large number of vulnerabilities, and a lot of those have been qualified as 0 days. So let's run a quick scan against our Spark server. We're going to use Nessus, or Tannible's Nessus for this one. And when we run the scan, we do find that there is a somewhat significant vulnerability. It's marked as critical. CVSS is a 5.4, so I mean, it's not world-ending or anything like that. But it's an out-of-date server. It has not been patched, and it is vulnerable to exploitation. So, Tom, you want to show us what we're doing here?
Yeah, so utilizing a well-known exploit against that server, we're able to get what's called a reverse shell. So we can basically issue a command against the server, and the server we can have make a reverse callback and actually connect to us, and we'll actually have a low-level shell into the organization. But as you can see here, we ran Who Am I? We're now root on a Linux machine inside their organization. So this is a machine that was on the edge of their network, and we were able to exploit it and get a root shell. And with that root shell, now we can use that as our pivot inside the organization. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So it's as if, we've basically come from the outside, and now we're sitting on the inside of their network, and it was positioned in such a way that it was kind of a flat network. And now we have access to be able to knock on all the doors of all the other servers and infrastructure inside their network.
Perfect. So yeah, let's go over what we have at this point. So right now we have our simple foothold. We have access into the network, but we don't have a valid username or a password or anything like that yet. We want to find a pathway to get to the more important pieces of the network. And the pieces that we're really going to be looking for are going to be the Active Directory Certificate Services box, wherever that may be. And we're also going to go after the domain controller. We're going to use our access to those two things to recover user accounts and password hashes, and then use that for a full takeover at this point. So one question that we had here really quick, and Tom, I know you were the one who brought this one up. when we talk about finding something like your ADCS host inside your network, oftentimes we are looking at doing that with a valid username and password. But what happens if we don't actually have that access yet?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's some tools that we'll be talking about in just a minute, but like say you're on a network and you're like, hey, I wonder if the folks are using Active Directory certificate services. There's actually a pretty easy way to find out just by using a simple tool like nmap and curl, right? So if you go and you do an nmap on the network, just looking for like 80 and 443, looking for the web servers, and you can actually identify if they're running Active Directory certificate services web service simply by doing some curls. So you go to the next screen. Basically, what I'm showing here is just a simple, dirty answer where I'm going to each web server and I'm grabbing for the base URL of that web server, and I'm grabbing for all caps NTLM. And if it comes back and none of those servers have an NTLM challenge, then I'll hit that same URL, but instead of going to the base host name, just go to cert SRV. Grab for that capital NTLM. If one comes back, that's likely means that they're running Active Directory web services as a web host on that network. So you can see here after the IP, so it's 172.16.2.11 is likely where their Active Directory certificate services are running. So with just a very basic tool and without any authentication, we can already pinpoint this is where we want to go.
And we're showcasing this because it really gives a good illustration about how having your network taken over is usually not the result of one giant problem that you have. It's oftentimes death by 1,000 cuts, and that's something that we really try to push in our proactive security trainings and everything else. In this path, we are going to be looking at something just like a basic misconfiguration, some type of configuration on maybe your domain controller that you could fix that would stop this in its tracks if that was the case. We're going to be going after weak passwords and then those misconfigured templates, and this is going to get us to the end. So, Tom, we were looking at getting user access at this point. We want user names so we can move a little bit further in. So how are we going to go about doing it?
Yeah, so we're on the network. We've figured out where the Active Directory certificate services are located, which is usually harder than your domain controllers. Domain controllers are really easy to find. There's specific services that all domain controllers run that you can go find. And what we're using here is a network tool called NetExec. And we're doing anonymous SAM RPC, which is the service that can give you information about like users and groups and machines and that nature. And we're actually using anonymous SAM RPC to enumerate all the users on the domain. So you simply go to a domain controller with no username, no password, and say, give me all the users. And if you have anonymous SAM RPC, which lately a lot of organizations we've been testing still have this available, you'll literally get every username in the entire organization. You can also then, like I said, go after groups so you can figure out, okay, which of these users are domain admins. You can find machine accounts, all sorts of things because SAM RPC is allowed anonymously. So now that we've got some usernames, let's go deeper.
Yeah, exactly. Before we do that, for those of you who are interested in how Tom does these things and how we go about formulating things like our attack plans through a network, we're actually going to be running a class here in December called Penetration Testing for IT Pros. So if you are a system administrator, or even if you're just a junior pen tester and you're looking at getting a little bit more information about how to go about things like, well, formulating your pathway from start to finish inside of a network, come check this out. This is a one-day class that Tom and I run.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, and my biggest goal with this class is that, if you've never had like an internal penetration test your organization and you bring someone like me in, I can almost write the report before I step in the door. And I want to solve that. I want to teach system administrators, here's how you look at your network critically so that you can solve a lot of the low-hanging fruit before we even show up.
Yeah, get your money's worth.
That's the goal of this class.
Exactly. All right, so we mentioned before that we were going to go after user accounts and passwords. So let's check for weak passwords first and foremost. We have a full list of account names, so that's going to give us half of the equation that we need here. But we can execute a password spraying attack pretty easily against this network at this point. So we're going to go after all the user accounts, and we're going to try weak or already compromised passwords. And what do you guys think? How many passwords do you think are available on the dark web and have already been compromised up to this point? Anyone have a guess? About 25.5 billion sets of credentials at this point. We have a big list that we can work off of here. But the funny thing is we oftentimes don't need to because people are really, really bad with passwords. I mean, you guys probably have people in your organization right now who are sitting down typing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 into a password field and feeling good about that. The ones we're going to go after are going to be standard formats, standard patterns that we see in a lot of cases. So like season, year, winter 2024 with an exclamation
Don't forget the exclamation point.
Oh, don't forget the exclamation point. That's what makes it hacker-proof, right? Or organization name one is one that we find all the time. Like this, it's ridiculous how simple these passwords are to guess. And if we're in a larger organization, our chances of finding a weak or reused password are really, really high. So let's, we had this on here too. So anybody remember Microsoft getting hacked by the Russian government back in January of 2024? This was a password spraying attack. It was just a weak password to let these guys in the door. This wasn't a 0-day. It wasn't this sophisticated nation state campaign. Somebody just had password 123 as their password and ended up getting roasted because of it. So there's your test. All right, so Tom, what are we going after here?
So we're going to use our favorite tool, NetExec, again. And this time we're going to use our user list that we built from SAMRPC, and we dumped all the usernames. And we're going to go ahead and try a simple password, which is just going to be the organization name one. And what's going to happen is that we're going to hit the domain controller, and each time we talk to the domain controller, we're changing the username and keeping that same password. And you'll see, red dashes for invalid login all the way up until the point that you find a user that says, you get the green plus sign. It's like, haha, you found a user that's using that bad password that you're trying. And also one of the other things with the anonymous SAMRPC, you can get things like the password policy. So I know how many bad tries I can do on each user before it locks out the account. So I can go as slow and low as I need to in order to make sure that I'm doing password spraying, but not locking user accounts out.
That's amazing. Again, amazing how well it works. And one thing I want to point out, so you'll see a heavy amount of redaction on a lot of these screenshots. That's mainly because these are coming from actual tests that we have done at LMG. These aren't a lot of these aren't things that we have mocked up. This is someone who we are actually breaking with just organization name one as the password. So it happens in reality. All right, so now let's look at what we have. Let's look at what our pathway has been so far. We have a username and we have a password. So that's going to give us a decent level of access to start with. But what else can we do with this little bit of information that we have? How can we fully expand? How can we complete this takeover? So our strategy here is going to be fairly simple. We are going to search for more misconfigurations. We're going to look for other things that we can take advantage of on the network, and usually there's quite a few that we can go after. If we find one, we may be able to exploit that and just make our way straight into admin. It might be that simple. So first we have to identify the certificate authority, which we've just showed kind of how we can do. Now we want to go through and we want to check configurations and see if there are any vulnerable certificate templates that we can take advantage of here. So Tom, you want to talk about the tool that you use for this?
Yeah, so the tool that we most often use, is especially once you have a low-level set of credentials in an organization, is a tool called Certify. Certify is a Python-based tool that enables you to query Active Directory and locate not only all the certificate authorities, but then all of the templates that are allocated to those certificate authorities. And then it analyzes both the CAs and the templates for common misconfigurations or vulnerabilities in the context of the user that you're logging in with. So if we've got a low-level user with low-level access, we can see what can that level of user do against the certificate authority. And so this is an example of us running Certify to find all the CAs and templates in our organization. In this particular example, we found 41 certificate templates, 2 certificate authorities, and out of those 41 templates, 32 of them were enabled. I think out of the box, default install is like 10. So this organization has clearly customized a lot of templates in their organization. And the more you customize templates, the more likely it is that you've possibly entered into creating a misconfiguration that could compromise your entire organization.
Yeah, exactly. So to start off with, now that we know we have some certificate templates we can go after, let's take a look at what a vulnerable template looks like. And we're gonna talk about this in the context of what are referred to as escalations. So this basically means that there is, based on some kind of misconfiguration with the template, a very specific way that I can escalate myself up to either impersonating a domain admin or impersonating something like the domain controller to gain that additional access that we're looking for. The one we're going to start with is going to be escalation 8. And technically, we're showcasing escalation 8 and escalation 11. But the reason we bring this one up is because this is kind of the one that makes the rest of these things function. And it is also one of the hardest ones to actually defend against. mainly because we'll talk about this as we go through the remediation steps, but the way that you stop something like this from being possible is not really a great set of steps inside your network. It can cause serious problems. But yeah, Tom, you want to go over what we're
Yeah, so escalation 8 and 11 are both vulnerabilities in the CA configuration itself. So escalation 8 is around web enrollment and being able to relay an NTLM authentication against the web service to actually issue a certificate. And then the escalation 11 is very similar, except via RPC. And typically you have to have assigning disabled in order to allow escalation 11 to occur.
Sure. And yeah, you can see in the configuration here that web enrollment is enabled and then request disposition is set to issue. So this means we have a pretty clear pathway towards elevation at this point based on that escalation. So here's the details behind this. Escalation 8 means that there is an NTLM relay possibility that's available to our ADCS through their HTTP endpoint. This is something that means that allows us to impersonate an inbound NTLM authentication attempt. Now we can do this using pretty much any AD account that we want to. We can then request a client cert for that account. And as Tom mentioned, escalation 11 is really similar to this, but it goes after RPC instead of HTTP. So now let's look at what we have. We're making our way through at this point. We have a username, we have a password, and now we have this known certificate authority vulnerability, which realistically isn't really a vulnerability, but...
Yeah. I mean, at this point, it's escalation 8 is actually just a configuration, right? And if you, by default, install ADCS and say, hey, I want web enrollment, out of the box, you've got escalation 8.
Yeah, right away. So what are you going to use to go after this one, Tom?
So at this point, since we have a low-level user credential, and in this particular case, we're not showing off any of the other template-based vulnerabilities. We're just showing what can you do with just web enrollment enabled. So we're showing off what we can do with a vulnerability called petty totem. So back in 2021. There is an unauthenticated coercion where you could talk to a domain controller to get a domain controller to connect back to you, and then you could relay on to another service. That's been patched. Everybody in this room should be patched against it. If you're not, run, don't walk, and go get patched for it. But what a lot of people don't realize is that even if you're patched for petty totem, there's a second kind of mode with petty totem where if you use domain valid user credentials, any user will work, even a machine account will work, I can still get the domain controller to do an NTLM handshake back to me because I have authentication with the domain controller. So with a low-level user account, I can get a domain controller to make a connection back to me that I relay onto the Active Directory certificate services and get it to issue a certificate, not as me, but as the domain controller.
Yeah, what kind of access do you have if the network thinks you're the domain controller?
So once you're the domain controller, I can talk to another domain controller. Hey, domain controller, you know how we share our NTLM password hashes? Yeah, I kind of need all those again. And you can actually go to another domain controller and request all the network hashes for every user account on the network at that point. So that's what we're going to do.
There we go.
So this is an example of us using the tool called petty totem. This is actually kind of step 2, and then we'll go back to step 1. But step 2 is basically where you use so we have an attacking machine on the network, right? And so we say, connect to the domain controller. Domain controller, you're going to connect back to us, and then we're going to use this username and password. And the petty totem Python utility will go to the domain controller and coerce that NTLM connection back to us. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll see what we do with that. And so with that certify tool, there's a relay mode where we will set up and listen on port 445, which is how the domain controller is going to want to talk back to us. And we will relay that back to the escalation 8 vulnerability on your Active Directory certificate services, and then get a certificate issued as that domain controller. And that's exactly what we did. And once you get that certificate, this is at the point where we can say, let's auth to the network with the certificate, and you'll get the NTLM hash of the domain controller. And on a Windows network, the NTLM hash is pretty much as good as the password in 90% of the cases. And in this particular case, we'll actually move on to the next slide, and we'll actually use a tool called secrets dump. And you can go to another domain controller and say, hey, domain controller, I'm this other domain controller, Toast Legit over here. Go ahead and give me all the NTLM hashes. NTLM hashes, by the way, are the easiest hashes on a Windows network to break. right? So, and this will be all the like administrators and everybody else on your network. And we wouldn't actually even have to crack passwords at this point. Like if I have a domain administrator NTLM hash, I am now effectively that domain administrator, and I can go do anything I want against any server I want in your environment. So it's pretty much game over at this point.
Yeah. So to recap, just in this one single attack path, we went from no access. We started with pretty much nothing on the network at any point, except for basic access into a peripheral Linux server that was running something like an external facing web app, which is something that a lot of attackers will go after. We exploited a known vulnerability on the network. We grabbed some usernames. We found a weak password, which is a very, very common scenario that we find especially when we look at bigger networks. We went after the domain controller. We exploited that, and then we stole everybody's password hashes. So basically, now we're done. I mean, we've completed the test at this point. We can crack those hashes if we'd like to. If we want to keep going, we have domain administrator hashes we can pass back and forth in the network. And so, effectively, we have reached the pinnacle here. But there are other ways that this kind of service can be exploited that are a little bit more, I would say, interesting than that first one. Before we get to that, though, let's talk about Escalation 8 and, again, why this is such a pain in your network. These are your mitigations for Escalation 8. If you wanted to configure your network to not be vulnerable to this kind of attack, you can either remove the HTTP or HTTPS endpoints or enrollment endpoints completely, which you may need. You can disable NTLM for those endpoints. You can enable extended protection for authentication. But again, none of these are really great ideas. Tom, you want to opine on this?
Yeah, and also client signing can help, but I've actually got other fun new techniques to actually, if you have client signing enabled, I can actually bypass that and coerce a client to communicate with us without the client signing. But yeah, there's short of disabling, do you need HTTP web enrollment, right? Is it, or can you just use RPC? So it's like, definitely, I think the web enrollment, the mitigations are not fantastic. And I would recommend if you don't need it, turn it off.
Fair enough. But wait, there's more. We have other ways that we can exploit these certificate services to gain ourselves some access. So you want to go over what's going on here with Escalation 1 really quick?
Yeah, so now we're going to back up and talk about some actual template-based vulnerabilities. So this is now, in these cases, we still need to have the certificate services web enrollment enabled, but now we're looking at the templates. So these are basically like the way that you can issue a certificate. There's rules around it. So has anybody ever put like HTTPS, TLS certificate on a web server, right? This is like where you create a CSR, you get the CSR sign, and you get a certificate from your certificate authority. This is looking at the templates that you're using in order to request those certificates themselves.
Yeah.
And so in this particular case, Escalation 1 has, is when you've got certain elements of your template that are enabled. So is the template, is the certificate that's going to be issued allowed to be used for client authentication? Is the template enabled? Often, it's like if you've got templates that you don't need, disable them in the CA. Then nobody can issue a certificate for them. And then one of the key aspects to a misconfiguration of Escalation 1 is that the enrollee supplies the subject. And what this means is typically, like, so take a web server example, right? For every website that you want to secure, you need to put in the host name of the web application or the web server that the TLS certificate is protecting. And so that means I get to supply that subject. Well, in a network where this is also used for client authentication, that subject doesn't have to just be a website. It could be a domain administrator. And so in this case, someone that can apply or request a certificate with a subject is pretty dangerous. So you want to limit your access to who can do that. And then also the fact that there's no management approval, which means that as soon as I request the certificate is instantly issued. That's a point in which we could actually cause the attack to not work.
Yeah, that's a pretty tough one to get around. I know, to just kind of reiterate what Tom was saying here. So this vulnerability works because of a piece of information called the subject alternative name, or your SAN. And you'll hear us refer to that as we move through. So we figured it was probably good to define that term so that you're not just hearing us throw acronyms out at you a little bit later. But what this does is it can request certificates for higher privileged users on the account. And if your template is configured to allow us to supply that name, that means that we can go after pretty much anyone we want to on the network as that person, more or less. This means that we can impersonate a domain admin, we can impersonate a system admin, we can do whatever we wanted to, and this allows us to escalate. So simplified explanation, Tom.
Yeah, so the example we're about to show you is where we're requesting a certificate using a vulnerable template, and we're going to say, well, we don't want the certificate for ourselves. We want the certificate for, well, let's say a domain administrator. So then we can literally go request a certificate for a domain administrator and actually assume their identity.
Yeah. So there are reasons why you might actually have this kind of configuration on your network. And again, we'll talk about mitigations as we get through the end of the example here. But here are some of the reasons why we might see this as a configuration that you want or potentially even need inside of your network. This can greatly streamline things like certificate requests for automation. If you have a lot of machines that are requesting certificates that you don't really have the time or the resources to do manual approval of, this could be a good way to get around that. As Tom mentioned before, we have the website example. If you're hosting a web server and there are multiple different websites being hosted on that server, this can be a great way of getting around having to have an individual cert for every single one of those sites, which can be kind of difficult to maintain. It can be kind of cumbersome. I mean, there's quite a few reasons for it. This may be something that is required for like a legacy configuration. So a legacy web app or a legacy piece of hardware on the network may require something like this setup. We used to see this a lot of times when we did a scanning copier or something like that on the network. The software and hardware associated with it just simply weren't new enough to be able to accept a different configuration. So we kind of had to kneecap ourselves. And then finally, this is going to prioritize convenience over security risks, which again is something that we see in a lot of cases. We want to make things easy for people to use inside the network, but in doing so, we run the risk of making things very insecure. There's kind of this bell curve when it comes to ease of use versus security, and it really comes down to, I mean, how nice do you want to be to your user base when you set these things up, right?
So in this, this is actually us using our certify tool, doing the request method where we use our low-level username and password, and then we target a different UPN. So at this point, we're saying, hey, we want to issue a certificate, but we want to use this other user as the target for the certificate, and we're using that awesome web server template because it was misconfigured to allow client authentication. So we go ahead and we trigger this against the Active Directory certificate services, and it will give us a blessed certificate for that domain administrator at this point.
Yeah, and we want to point out too, we're getting the certificate and we're also getting the private key. So this is where we're breaking that level of security we expect to have with public-private key encryption and the infrastructure that it kind of relies upon here. All right, so now what are we going to do?
Yeah, and so then we then can, just like the previous example where we use the certificate of a domain controller, we can now use the certificate of the domain administrator and actually get their password hash. It could be even more interesting because it's the NTLM hash. You could actually go and crack that offline. Or, like what we do often is we just use pass the hash, and we use that hash, the NTLM hash, to directly go dump all the user passwords, again, from your domain controller.
Yeah, works pretty well, right? So here's an example of us actually going through and doing that. So here's us going ahead and querying using that password hash. Again, dumping all the hashes we can get back from the DC at this point, and we're going after the NTDS. I mean, most of you have probably seen something like this before, right? It becomes pretty easy once we have all this information available to us. So how did we find ourselves in the position where we were vulnerable to this specific escalation? Like, what kind of exact changes did we have to make to our certificate template to basically kneecap ourselves at this point?
Yeah, this is from the Active Directory Certificate Services Management interface. If you get into a template and you modify the template, these are the three areas. So the first area is under subject name, and right there it says supply in the request. With this enabled, you need to be real careful around a couple other things, and those are the other two that we're showing here. Is that because the request supply the subject in the request means that I can request a certificate for anybody. The second, if you have that, you should never have this certificate is allowed for client authentication. I don't care who you are, even if you're enterprise admin is able to issue a certificate. It should not be allowed to be used for client authentication. And so that's the second misconfiguration here. In the middle is that what's the certificate allowed to be used for? And if it can be used for client authentication and a user can supply the subject, that means you're rife for impersonation attacks in your organization. And then the third is who's allowed to enroll in this template. And so in this particular case, any authenticated user is allowed to enroll this template. So that means anybody, anybody want a certificate for anybody else with this configuration, this is exactly how you do it. So you unclick, it's as simple as, and these misconfigurations happen easily, right? And I don't want to blame anybody. Often, I was in your shoes as a system administrator for years, and it's like, it's not working. Let's try this. Hey, all of a sudden I chose some options and it works. What do you do then? Leave it alone, right? And so then that's how this happens. And, I've got, real empathy for all the defenders out there, because you make it work and you're like, okay, don't touch it because I don't really understand this anyways, right? And away we go.
Yeah. No, I was a system admin for over a decade before I got into cybersecurity, and I can fully attest to that. Once you get something working on your network, you back away from it and you don't touch it again, because otherwise you're going to make everyone mad, and well, that means working overtime, which none of us want to do. But again, mitigating this escalation one, it is basically what Tom just said. I mean, we just go backwards through the slide that we just showed you. These three things are really the big elements of making this an exploitable vulnerability inside the network. So if we can do something like uncheck supplying the request, great. If we can't, there may be some other mitigating things that we can do to stop this from being a usable exploit. And then there's also CA certificate manager approval, although we want to be careful about this one, because again, this means that anytime someone requests a certificate, there becomes a series of steps that you need to go through to actually approve that. And if we're working heavily on automation, that may not be the best way to go. So again, just be careful about how you go about mitigating these things. So you want to talk about escalation 4?
Yeah. So the next exploitation path that we have seen, actually I've even seen this is against authenticated users. I've even seen this in one case against guest access, had access, where basically this is a template where any user or the user group that we had access to had full control over a template. And so what that means is that as an authenticated user in this particular case, I can modify that template. So in this particular case, we queried it, and this template wasn't really vulnerable to anything except for escalation 4, which means I could modify that template. So then what we did is we used Certify with the template profile, and we, if you want to flip to the next slide, we were able to basically modify that template and turn it into a multiple escalation a vulnerable template. So before it just had escalation 4, now it's got 1, 2, 3, and 4, so that you could actually use this in any way that you want at this point.
Yeah, and we want to look at some of the permissions we were able to set on this certificate template, because I mean, this thing got blown wide open simply because of that one initial vulnerability. So now everything that we were worried about is set to true. So client authentication is true, enrollment agent is true, any purpose is true, enrollments or enrollee supply subjects is true. And I want to look at the validity period too. This went from being a 1-year cert to a 5-year cert. And now we can really maintain some access here. If you don't revoke this certificate and the access that goes along with it, as we mentioned before, this means that a password reset will not help you get someone out of your system if they have that level of access. I mean, they are there until you take some pretty significant steps for it. So testing the template, we went through basically the same thing. Now we want to verify that we're set up for escalation 1. So Tom, you want to take us through this one last time?
Exactly. So we just basically did the same thing that we did before. So once we took an escalation 4 template, converted it into one that was escalation 1, a Pohl, if you will, then we went ahead and just issued that same domain administrator certificate now with that same template, because now it is vulnerable because we made it more vulnerable. And so then we were able to get the same certificate. You get the same NTLM hash when you authenticate with it, and you're off to the races again.
There you go. So taking care of escalation 4, and this is the last one we'll talk about before we end out here, but mitigating escalation 4 really comes down to the same kind of principles that you would need to apply for solid identity and access management. We're just worried about overly permissive users in the network at this point. Do they have access to things that they shouldn't? Can they manipulate things that they shouldn't be able to? And in this case, going through, we can see that authenticated users inside of the security properties are just set to everything. I mean, they have full control. They can read, they can modify, they can.
It's a very similar interface to like a file server.
It really is, yeah.
You know, who hasn't gone to a folder and a file share and say, "Oh, just give everybody full control." Doing that in this particular type of example, doing the same thing with a similar interface, you are actually now completely exposing your network.
Yeah, it's so like I said, easy enough to fix if you're diligent about how you assign permissions inside of your network. which again is something that we should all be doing and something that we should all have a plan for, but also something that gets overlooked in a pretty large amount of situations. And as Tom mentioned before, sometimes this comes down to simply troubleshooting. If you're trying to get a certain application to work, if you're trying to get someone access into a certain file system or something like that, you may just start enabling permissions for people because you're really kind of trying to toss a Hail Mary here and get them the access that they need. And once they have that access, we back away. We don't do anything else with it because we don't want to break what we've already done up to this point. All right, so we've showed you how to exploit these things, but from a defensive standpoint, how do we actually detect that we have these misconfigurations on the network? What kind of tools do we have available? And what kind of tactics and techniques can we use to identify these things before someone like Tom comes in and just wrecks every hash for every user inside of your network? Which, again, if you're looking at getting the most bang for your buck on a pen test, you don't want him to be able to walk through the door and just hit your CA and elevate directly to domain admin. I mean, that's a great finding, but it means his job is easy, and we don't want his job to be easy. We want his job to be really difficult because that means it's good for you.
Yeah, I want my guys to, my gentlemen and ladies to struggle.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that means you guys are doing what you need to do in order to protect your organization. At the end of the day, that's what we care about.
Yeah, exactly. So if you are looking at detecting these misconfigurations and proactively going out against these things, there are some things that you can actually do. First, you want to start with an audit of your certificate authority. Understand where it is, understand how many certificates you have available, how many are enabled, and then there are some automated tools that you can use to actually identify ahead of time whether or not you are vulnerable to any of these either escalations or misconfigurations without having to run a pretty heavy-handed tool like Certify. There's one called PSPKI Audit. It's a PowerShell-based toolkit that you can use inside your network from a standard user prompt. And this will query your certificate authority and come back and let you know if there is potential vulnerability. Now, one thing I want to point out about applications like this is depending on your configurations and how your CA is actually put together, they are prone for false negatives when it comes back to the results on these tests. So just because, like we were talking about escalation 8, just because something like this application comes back and says that you don't have an NTLM vulnerability, that does not necessarily mean that you don't. It just means that it didn't find it on that run. So a little bit of manual intervention is also pretty useful in situations like this. The other thing we want to talk about is how you actually handle vulnerabilities inside your network. And so vulnerability scanning is one of the top controls that we've been pushing this year, mainly because we have seen that massive increase in the utilization and exploitation of things like not just zero-day vulnerabilities, but vulnerabilities in general. There is a site on the darknet you can go to called zeroday.today that has this entire catalog of exploits and vulnerabilities, and most of them are free to anyone who wants them at this point. We've used it for a couple of our demos, and it was stupidly easy for us to go in, get something that was a pretty significant vulnerability, or at least a POC for it, and then execute against a server that we had set up about a week prior to that vulnerability coming out. It cost us $0 to do that. And we're not the only ones doing that. We're not just researchers. So again, we want to make sure that you're vuln scanning, automate the process, make sure you're using a trusted vulnerability scanner to make your way through the process for you. And then make sure that you get a comprehensive report out of it that can help you triage, can help you rearrange, organize, and make sure that you're not leaving yourself vulnerable. And if you're worried about this, consider working with a trusted third party on this. There are a lot of organizations out there that will help you with your vulnerability management. And oftentimes the services they provide are way, way cheaper than hiring on a team of people to do this for you inside your own network. Next thing we want to talk about is penetration testing. So everyone needs to remember that vulnerability scanning can't find everything, or it will not find anything. And Tom, you want to talk about why pen testing is so much different from vuln scanning?
Yeah, so I mean, in penetration, let's level set. Penetration testing is not the same as vulnerability scanning. Actually, vulnerability scanning is like step one of penetration testing. And this is where, and there's a big push around automated penetration testing or automated, AI based, which I think it's going to be coming along and doing well. But let me give you an example of what we did inside of one organization that led to full compromise that no amount of automated scanning is going to get, right? So, we'll often attack like IoT devices. Like my favorite example is inside of a law firm, the very large law firm, where I attacked a printer. And that printer had a credential, and we got a credential out of that printer. And once we had that credential, where can we use that? And so we found, file shares. And in one of the file shares, we found source code to a web application that ran on their Amazon infrastructure. And inside that Amazon web application that we found root credentials to their entire Amazon environment. And so, from a low-level default credential on a printer, we're able to completely compromise their entire organization because we are able to piece several lower level or low to medium vulnerabilities together to come up with a critical finding. And that's what's important, is putting your vulnerabilities in the context to your organization in a meaningful way. And if you're not doing that, you're just, it's like, how many people here have 100,000 vulnerabilities that their scanner is showing right now, right? In your organization. How do you prioritize that? That's hard, right? And being able to piece those together or find those paths of those vulnerabilities that are going to lead to critical findings is important. And that's where penetration testing is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys want to know more about the some of the stories that he was telling here, Tom did a presentation here for SAINTCON last year called How I Met Your Printer, which is an absolutely amazing walkthrough on multiple different ways that you can wreck a network by just getting access to something like a multifunction printing device. Kind of scary when you think about it. But yeah, go check that out. I think
or at 3:30 today, we're giving another talk, right. Derek and I, on some of the bad things that we find in networks and how to exploit them and how we figured out how to exploit them. So if you want to see sometimes security products on your network are making you less secure, come at 3:30.
Perfect. All right, so before we take off, we'll go ahead and end out here. Thank you guys all so much. But we are going to be running a cyber first responder class as well. It's another one of the live classes that I run. So if you are working as a system administrator and want to know a little bit more about incident response or forensics or any of the other kind of defensive elements of cybersecurity, go ahead and check us out. Otherwise, I will leave you with our top security controls of 2024. You can grab a copy of this from the LMG website if you'd like to at lmgsecurity.com/top-2024. The two big ones that we talked about today are going to be scanning and vulnerability management and penetration testing. But the rest of these are no less important. So with that, thank you all so much, and I will open it up for questions if you have any. Let's start there.
And is your slide deck going to be available?
Question was, is our slide deck going to be available? Yes, our slide deck will be available. This presentation will also be up on the SAINTCON YouTube channel. So,
does Nessus do any checks?
So the question was, does Nessus do any kind of checks for certificate vulnerabilities? Tom, you work with Nessus.
Nessus directly doesn't, but if you subscribe to Tenable One, they do have some Active Directory checks that you can run against your organization. But it's not in the Nessus product directly that I'm aware of. Actually, they may have come out with a new check, but
perfect. Let's go there.
So looking at RC in the structure, we're very decentralized, have multiple VM solutions. All those VM solutions are configured to provide their own subject. What?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah. So then, provide their own subject. Who's allowed to issue that certificate? So you have to visit all of those things. So do you need client authentication with that? Or are you just providing, and then also, are you limiting it to you can limit it just to machine accounts. So you can say, hey, you have to have a machine account in order to do that, not just a regular user account. So then you'd actually have to compromise a local machine in order to get like the machine credential in order to issue a certificate. But here's a question. What can a regular user account do on the default configuration in Active Directory? Create a machine account. In fact, how many, I got shot glasses up here. So sorry I haven't been throwing these at people. How many machine accounts can a standard user account create? Anybody know?
What do you think?
10, right there. There you go.
Nice.
10. So by default, a regular user account, if you don't reconfigure that, a user can create a machine account. But in that case, if you only allowed machine accounts to issue the certificate, then you could stop some of that attack, or at least mitigate it, because you need that user to be, or those credentials be able to issue a certificate.
Perfect. Let's go right down the middle.
I feel they use the code for what they it's like the app and
so are you I apologize, I had a hard time hearing your question. Was it, or you said something about Apple
and their 4-day certificate timers?
Oh, 4-day certificate timers on Apple. Exactly. So this is where ironclad automation and making sure that the permissions are set the way that only the account that needs to request those certificates can issue those certificates is going to be important. And this is where often, I'll see, any authenticated user, that's taking a shortcut. You need to lock it down and use the least privilege and only allow the users that need to create those certificates to be able to create those certificates. Does that answer your question?
Well, with everything ignites, every user need to have it.
Yeah, that's where, everything has to be automated. Exactly. So putting that step where a manager has to approve it isn't going to be your solution, because you do need automated certificate issuing.
Or you hire more managers. Like a lot more. I think we got time for one more. Anybody else have a question? Yeah.
Nobody suggested study material or books or website or anything that would like additional information. What to do?
Yeah,
Sure,
actually, I think there's a learning path on like Hack the Box that covers this. Definitely. More and more, we're starting to see more and more training out there into specifically for PKI, because this is the path du jour that a lot of organizations are getting hit with.
There was a white paper that was put out. The URL went on the bottom of this.
Certified pre-owned.
Certified pre-owned by Spectre Ops. Really great research on this. Yeah,
they're the ones that created the certified tool. So go learn from them, because they're doing great research there.
Great. All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your SAINTCON.